All right. Hi, Reika. It is great to see you. Thanks for coming on Conversations for Yoga Teachers.
Thank you, Karen, for having me. And I'm so excited that I get to have another conversation with you.
That's right. For the listeners, Reika was kind enough to have me on her show. Full-time Yoga Teacher is the name of her podcast. And we had such a great conversation. I said, hey, you know what? You need to switch seats, come on my podcast, and I get to ask the questions now. So I'm really glad we had a chance to set this up. So why don't we start out by having you just tell me and the listener where you are in the world right now, where do you live, and tell us a little bit about what inspired you to begin teaching yoga.
Mm. Yeah, so right now I am based in Long Beach, California, which is part of LA County, so Southern California. And what inspired me to start teaching yoga? I was always active growing up. I always, played around outside a lot, played in sports. I played basketball for high school and also university. And I just love being active. And when I was doing my master's program, I lived in South Africa and I did my master's program in University of Cape Town. That's when I started practicing yoga asana. And I had one part-time job there that was a research assistant job, and that was the job that I had to just sit in the office for like 8 hours a day. And at that point, I just knew I did not want to ever end up working at a place where I had to sit 8 hours a day. It was not for me. I just love moving my body so much and interacting with people. Just because I love movement so much, when I first started really get into yoga practice, I started going every day and really enjoyed it. And I started to notice that the yoga teachers that I had, they were just, in my eyes, I felt like they were glowing from inside. Like they had this glow about them from the inside. And I was like, wow, this is like something about that was very inspiring for me. And it kind of attracted me. Like, wow, they look like they are just in alignment with living in alignment with what they love to do. So I think that's the part that kind of planted a seed in me, like, maybe I would like to be a yoga teacher one day. Like they just look really um, glowing and they just look like they were in alignment. And fast forward, after graduating, I traveled quite a bit and continued to practice yoga regularly. But I started to see the common thread in all of my jobs that I had during college and post-college was that it was all quite active jobs, something where I'm moving my body, a job that I was interacting with people, having conversations, building relationships. And I just knew that sitting down in an office just wasn't going to be for me. And I was working for a travel active company, leading trips around the world on a bicycle, which was an amazing company to work for. But I knew that was not where I wanted to continue pursuing because I felt like I wanted to do something that was also not just, I wanted to I wanted to have a job that I felt like I was contributing to betterment of the world in some way or form. And I felt like working for a travel company for me at the time didn't feel like I was fulfilling that desire. And when it was a seasonal job, so when that season ended, I was like, okay, I have 3 months to do whatever I want. So how would I want to spend my next 3 months? And I decided I'm going to take teacher training, yoga teacher training. I always was interested in becoming a yoga teacher. I love practicing yoga, and I would love to share yoga with others. And felt like it was a right path for me since like I said, I'm not interested in an office job and I just love moving my body and sharing it with others. So that's kind of how I ended up taking my first 200-hour teacher training. It was a 1 month intensive. It worked out perfect with my seasonal jobs that I had. But even before all of that, I was born in Nepal and I grew up in Japan. So I was raised in a household of both of my parents are Buddhist. So that spirituality and meditation and those kind of practices were always there for me growing up. So that spirituality part and philosophical part of yoga always felt really familiar and really felt like home to me. But then yoga asana combining the physical movement part that I love, I just felt like it was such a perfect combination of something that I really wanted to do and share with others.
Hmm. I'm curious, when you were describing your first foray into taking classes and you were looking at the teachers and sort of feeling like that's something I aspire to be, when you began teaching yoga,
Mhm.
how did your experiences teaching yoga either match what you imagined they would be or not match or something in between? Because sometimes yoga teachers have some inspiration that propels them to enroll in a teacher training and then they start teaching and the expectation or the vision they had doesn't match the reality of what they're experiencing, and that can be for a number of reasons. I'm just curious, for you, when you began teaching, did you feel like, oh, this is exactly what I thought it would be, or something different?
Mm. Great question. I don't think I had exact expectations of what it would be like or what it would look like. And I had no idea I was going to become a full-time yoga teacher either. But I can say even till now, like I never ever felt like um, this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. So like soon as I started teaching yoga, I loved it. I obviously there's always challenging time. There's going to be a challenge. There's a learning curve. All that is part of it, but I think it's so always so grateful that I get to do this every single day and I get to teach yoga and this is my career path. It's something that I'm really really grateful for and happy that I get to do this every day because I really believe from, seeing many people and talking to many people, not everybody can say that they love their job that they get to do every day or whatever, how many hours of each week. And I like really from bottom of my heart can say that I love what I do. And although it's going to be a challenging time and sometimes you're tired, sometimes you're exhausted, all that is part of it, but I love what I do. So it's always been clear for me. And longer I've been teaching, it has become more and more clear that I'm on the right path. Like I just can't see myself doing anything else for now. I'm not stuck on it. So like life could, change and, path could change and I could go through a different windy road and maybe I'll end up doing something else in the future. But for now, I just really love what I do.
That's awesome. And I can certainly tell by looking at your face, you just definitely radiate similarly, ironically, to how you describe those teachers. And it just definitely conveys, and just the way you speak and carry yourself, that you're definitely in your Dharma. You're feeling like this is a match for you. So similar to that question I asked before, I'm sort of curious, and I think about this in terms of myself as well, what it looks like now for you. And I want to get into that more so that the person listening can get a sense of, this is how you make a living. What does that actually look like? What are the components of that? But before we go there, just from a high level, how does what you're doing now and how you're, being a yoga teacher in today times, how does that compare to when you began teaching? And when you began teaching, would you have thought what you're doing now is what you would be doing? Like the person that started teaching, give me a sense of kind of
Mhm.
how it looks for you now. Is that how it looked for you when you began? What sort of changes have happened?
Yeah, definitely a lot of changes has happened. I think, because for my podcast, full-time yoga teacher podcast, I get to interview someone like you and other teachers who does this for a full time. So for me, I think this is a little bit more rare case, but I just kind of went straight on. Soon as I finished 200 hour, I'm like, okay, let's see if I can make a living out of this. Just kind of went straight on trying to be a full-time yoga teacher from the beginning. I was able to do that because I had those seasonal jobs. So I had like 3 months off. So let's see if I can make it work. And if I don't, I'll go back to my, traveling job. So I kind of went straight on. So in the beginning, it definitely looked a lot different than it does now. In the beginning, I was just trying to teach as many classes as possible, applying to so many places. And in the beginning, I taught not only yoga classes, I taught spin classes, I taught hit classes. I was working at a studios, checking people in, cleaning studios. So I was kind of trying to do whatever I can to make enough money to live in LA, which is not a cheap place to live. So in the beginning, it was not only teaching yoga. I tried to stay in the field, but with a goal that I knew my goal was eventually I want to start to focus just teaching yoga if possible and slowly get rid of my cleaning job or my checking in people job or oh I used to dog walk a lot, dog sit and dog walking. So all these little side things that I did to try to make a living in LA. So in the beginning it was just kind of I you know I'm not a huge fan of this word, but I was hustling. I had to hustle so much to make enough money to live in LA. And so I would say kind of overworking, just running around from places to places and kind of barely making ends meet. That's kind of how it was in the beginning. How has it has shifted? It's almost 10 years in, is that definitely teach less number of classes per week. And I don't teach any other format in terms of I don't teach spin or I don't teach hit or I'm not cleaning the studios or checking people in at the studio, those things. And even dog walking, dog sitting, I let them go. So now I just get to teach yoga, which is what I wanted from the first beginning. So I'm happy that I get to teach yoga. But I think a lot of shift that happened mentally for me was in the beginning, I was always working for someone. I was working for studio. I was working for a gym. I was working for, you know, I was working for another person's business. And I still do to this day. I still work for some studios, but there was a switch eventually happened in my brain of, okay, I need to start building my own thing. So I don't have to completely just rely on somebody else's business to make money. I need to diversify my income streams and work out several different places, but also have my own business, have my own offerings, have my own trainings or programs that I sell online or in-person workshop training. So slowly became a little bit more business savvy, although I don't think I'm that great of a business person, but I try to be. But try to rely less on other people and try to kind of build my own small business so I can feel more independent and empowered that even if tomorrow that yoga studio closes or even tomorrow another pandemic happens, I can still rely and trust that I do have different streams of income that I'll be okay. So I think that's
Mm.
change that happened.
Yeah, that's so important. I think about when a couple of months back when TikTok was banned and it went away for a couple of days, and so many creators depend on TikTok for all their revenue, and they were freaking out, how am I going to make money? And that's the perfect example of what you're talking about. To diversify is to protect you and your brand and your ability to make money versus putting all your eggs in one basket. And having said that, though, I would imagine, and I can certainly relate to what you're saying in my own way, that it's a little scary to step out on your own. So, how did you manage those feelings of instead of being under the umbrella of somebody else's business, which is definitely a little safer to a certain extent? How did you find the courage to step out on your own and do some things on your own?
Yeah, great question. And I think speaking to a lot of yoga teachers myself, I think pandemic was a huge turning point for a lot of yoga teachers and almost pandemic forced us who were maybe thinking about starting their own thing or starting this business or starting this online store or teaching on their own. Pandemic kind of forced that for or kind of like pushed us to like, okay, this is the time to start doing it. And I know, I think you and several people I have spoken to, they kind of already had an online presence before the pandemic, which I think was so smart. But for me, it was a pandemic that kind of pushed me to like, okay, this is a time for me to start building my own online platform. I'm going to start teaching online more, start offering online courses more. And when pandemic ended and studios started to open back up again, that's when I decided to consciously be a little bit more intentional on who do I choose to go back to, which studios, how many classes a week am I gonna go teach at this location, that location, that's this location versus like how much of my own online, online business that I have built that I'm gonna continue to try to grow. So since the pandemic is what kind of, pushed me and encouraged me to give me that nudge to start my own thing. And after the pandemic, I just knew I didn't want to go back to the pre-pandemic way of life of just teaching so many classes and just running around from studio to studio. So now I'm like, okay, now I'm going to try to find balance of like a little bit of studio, a little bit of this location, little bit of this, a little bit of that, and also like my own private businesses and kind of try to find a nice balance. And I'm always trying to look for I'm always trying to I'm always seeking, I guess, to find a balance. But I think as a full-time yoga teacher, our schedules are always kind of shifting and changing every few months or quarters. So it's always shifting and changing and, learning to kind of go with the flow and trying to be intentional with the decision I make of where and who I teach for.
Mm. Yeah, I can totally relate to what you said. I mean, I have been teaching here in Boston for over 20 years, and there were plenty of times before COVID where I really questioned traipsing around, walking over the Mass Ave Bridge, walking here, walking there, in all sorts of weather. Is this really what I want to continue to do? But there was a part of me that thought if I give up these classes, I'm never getting them back because there's way more yoga teachers than there are spots open in yoga studios. And so I was really questioning, did I really want to give up some of those slots? And but for the pandemic that shut down all the studios, I don't know what I would have done. I probably would have maybe scaled back, but I had been juggling both the online and the in-person for a number of years. And who knows, maybe I would have just kept going that way. So I can definitely relate to what you're saying. I'm curious, tell me a little bit more about when you started to build out this online component.
Mhm.
I did a little checking on your website, so I have a sense, but for the listener, tell us a little bit about what you started to build.
Yeah. In the beginning, I remember I was teaching Zoom classes for the studio that I worked for. And I continued that. But then I was like, what if I just started teaching Zoom classes on my own? So I kind of reached out to the people on my newsletter, which is one thing I always tell my other yoga teachers, my mentees, is like start collecting email addresses. Like it's never too late, start now. So reached out to my newsletter and say if anybody interested in Zoom classes, if I start offering once a week or twice a week. So that's kind of how I started, was just teaching a couple Zoom classes a week to people in my community of the email list that I had. And and then I decided that okay, let's create a course. And I have idea and kind of created a curriculum for the course as part of my 300-hour teacher trainings before, but never really had time to like actually make that course happen. So pandemic time, I was like, okay, I'm gonna make this course happen. And it was a 7-week course. And I decided to do that online and offered 7-week. It was a chakra yoga class or series. So that's why it was 7 weeks. And that actually I turned out to get a lot more students to sign up for that online course than I expected. And I was like, I want to keep this momentum going. Like we have this weekly group that were coming to me every week, and I'm like, I got to keep this momentum going. So at the so I had no idea at the beginning of this 7 week series. I had no idea, but towards the end, I was like, I need to launch an online yoga studio. And by before this 7 week series end, and then towards the end, I'll make this announcement and be like, hey, you all come join my online studio. We can continue practicing with one another, kind of try to keep the momentum going that way. And that's kind of how I launched my online yoga studio. And that was 4 years ago. I think we had our 4 year anniversary last year. So this year will be our 5th year running that online yoga studio. And it just me and I teach 4 times a week online, but all the classes are recorded. So there's on-demand library of people who can watch the recording later. And a lot of offshoots from there, like courses or workshops or book clubs, or I'll bring guest teachers in. I have my mentorship. So like I was able to kind of create different businesses that is part of this online yoga studio that I have.
That's really cool. Now, one of the things I hear sometimes is people want to do what you're describing, but they're afraid that they're not going to find people to join. So
Mhm.
I hear what you're saying about the mailing list. Tell me
Mhm.
a little bit more about how, especially now that you've been running for a number of years, how do you keep getting new people to join, like from a kind of mechanics perspective, what are some of the steps that somebody might go through and
Mhm.
end up taking an online class with you?
Yeah, I think for me, it was helpful to have been teaching in person for I don't know 3 to 5 years before the pandemic. So I started collecting email addresses from those in-person classes that I was teaching, and I started to build my community that way from those in-person relationship that I had.
Mhm.
And um this is, and I think every teacher is going to be different, but for me that's kind of where even nowadays most of the relationship starts is somehow I know this person, meet this person in person. They have taken my classes or workshop, taken my teacher training somewhere in person, and they somehow are part of my newsletter community. So when they see that I'm offering new courses, new classes, new online offering, they see it and they already trust me because they have seen me, they have taken my classes, they know they like my classes or my style. So they feel they trust me to sign up for my courses or offerings. So for me, it kind of started building from this in-person relationships. And I do have people through referral, somebody recommended me, and in that way, I have gotten some students. But mostly, even still to this day, it's most of the people who join my online and continue to join my online courses or offerings are people who they somehow know, most of them, not all, most of them have known me in person first, and then they have, then there's this almost like a trust, like, oh, I like this teacher, I've taken her class, I like her vibe, I would love to go take her online classes. So that's kind of how it has been going. And that's kind of why I still love teaching live no sorry I love teaching in-person classes at studios, because that's a great way to meet more students, and it's a great way to get your word out there, people to get to know you, your teaching styles, and then maybe those people eventually would be interested in taking my offerings outside of the studio.
Right, right. Okay. So let's stay a little bit in this zone of you as a teacher teaching students, because I want to go at some point to you and your mentorship program and how that goes. For right
Mhm.
now, though, when you're teaching your classes and in your own development as a teacher, what are some of the things maybe that you initially struggled with and you were able to sort of move past? Like, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I think, I mean, there's so much struggles in the beginning, right? As a new yoga teacher, it's like there's imposter syndrome, and you compare yourself to others, and there's so much challenges as a new teacher that I hear all the time, and I'm sure you do too. So definitely, I went through all of that. and still go through, to this day. So I think I can really relate to many of the challenges that teachers go through. But I think with time, I think just putting in a lot of time helps. Like more you teach, like if you do something thousands of time, you are going to get better at that, whatever craft you're working on.
Mm,
So same thing with teaching. If you teach thousands and thousands of classes, you're just going to become better at it. The cueing might become smoother, or you start developing eyes to be able to see students more. And you and I also started to find this is my style, this is how I teach, and this is what it feels in alignment for me to teach.
mm,
Whereas in the beginning, I was trying to cater more to like what's popular or what my students are going to like,
mm,
which I think can be important, but it's so easy to get swept away in what's popular and what you think what other people want out of your class. And that's just too much um, guessing and trying to follow trends. But longer I started teaching, and also longer I've done more trainings and got to become more confident in my teaching, I started to realize what's important for me as a teacher and what resonate for me and what is true for me to teach. Um, that knowing and I guess that confident helped me be very confident in my teaching. That it's okay that I don't teach in this certain way that might be popular right now, or it's okay that my teaching style is very different than this person who might have packed classes every week. Like those things didn't matter as much anymore because I felt so strong, and I trusted the value in what I was teaching.
mm.
And when I got to that point, those things didn't really matter. So I think that only can come with time and really teaching a lot, and also doing a lot of my own training and, self-reflections, and really realizing what's important for me as a teacher. How can I pass this, beautiful ancient knowledge of yoga on in a way that feels very true to me, and the way that's not going to kind of get washed down by what I feel like it's popular right now.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you that with time, we get better at anything. And if we focus on what we're talking about, teaching yoga, there's absolutely no denying that with time, we get better at it. I'm
Hmm.
also curious because when I talk to someone like yourself who has put in the time, if I can find out more about what was going on in your head, like let's just take that specific thread about you felt confident enough to lean into your own way of teaching, even though you might see other people with packed classes teaching differently. If I can learn more about how you were able to feel confident enough to do that, then someone listening to you describe what you thought and what you did, even if they're newer, can
Hmm.
bypass maybe 5 years
Hmm.
of continuing to be triggered by what everybody else is doing simply by learning how you did it. So I'd love to know because what you just talked about is so central to loving teaching. It's going in and feeling like it's so easy for me to do this. It's a complete ease of me being myself
Hmm.
versus I'm triggered by the other person who just taught before me whose class was packed. I'm triggered when I walk in the room and I don't feel like I'm good enough. So tell me, what did you do or what shifted in your head that
Hmm.
allowed you to really own your own way of teaching?
Yeah, definitely. I think it helps. The continuing education for me is a huge, huge component of like it's one of my big pillar of just growing as a person, not only as a teacher, but also a practitioner and as a person. Like I love to keep learning. So for me, having teachers that I have huge respect for, that I get to learn from and take their trainings or go take their workshop, whether it's online or in person, even if it's once a year, or a few times a year, whatever it is. I think that has really helped me ground myself as a teacher, because I have a few teachers that I really, really respect and learned under for many years. I think that was helpful. That was one of the things, because if I had many, many teachers, I think I would have been confused as a teacher myself, because like, oh, this teacher teach it this way, but this teacher teach it this way. It's like, oh no, how should I teach? But if I have like one or two that I'm really dedicated to learning from, and I respect so much as a teacher and really love and resonate with their teaching style or their teaching, philosophy, and kind of go deep and learn from that person and be around that person. And that has, I think, helped a lot. So I want to, just to be respectful, name my teacher. My main teacher is Annie Carpenter, and she has made a huge influence on my teachings, as well as Amy Echo, and she teaches philosophy. She's my main philosophy teacher. So those two for sure had a huge influence on me.
Well,
So I
let me just jump in here for a sec, because part of what I really want you to clarify and just give me more kind of detail on, because so many teachers will hear what you're saying and they'll think the answer to me going into my classes and teaching authentically is to get hours and hours of training. And
Mhm.
I don't think that's what you're saying. I think there's something that's underneath there. And I'm going to pose it in a particular way. And this is where I'd love to know what just pops in your head.
Uh-huh.
What does working with Annie Carpenter, what does that give you
Mhm.
that, but for working with her, you
Mhm.
would not have in terms of how you feel as a teacher?
Mm.
Like if you had never taken trainings with her and you kept going into the room and feeling triggered and feeling less than, when you said earlier, I love learning and it's important to learn. What does that give you? Like what, because again, there are teachers out there and I meet them a lot who take hours and hours and hours of training. And it's this endless hamster wheel of looking for their confidence by going to hours of training, looking for their confidence and not getting those results. So
Yes.
there's something in it that
Uh-huh.
you had a light bulb moment where it shifted how you felt. I'm just guessing,
Yes.
because it's not like you're just nonstop in training with this person, because we can say we can endlessly learn. So there was some light switch along the way that flipped.
Mm-hmm.
You're sitting here today saying, but for this training I took with this person, I might still be out there
Yeah.
feeling like I'm not qualified to teach yoga.
Definitely, I think training is one of the biggest important things, but you have to still go out there and teach, like you can't just keep training and training and training, because in the field when you're actually teaching is where you gain the real life experience. So I think t learning, getting the training from the teachers have given me the tools and things to reflect on, so that I can bring it to it, feel embody it first in my body.
Yeah.
Uh, not just copycat your teacher, but like feeling and embodying what you learn, and really the kind of marinating and digesting all the material you learn from your teacher, and then bringing it to your classes and the way you teach. And you also don't, in your own way, right? Like, because I'm not going to be a mini Annie Carpenter, I'm going to be me, but her teaching run throughs me.
Mhm.
So definitely, I think the way to see, um, I have been able to, I think it's so important to be able to see and witness your students,
Mhm.
and not just go in the front of the room and start teaching on your mat the whole time, but like actually see your students and adjusting your cues, adjusting your sequences, adjusting whatever to what you're seeing. And I think that's some of the gift that my teachers have taught me, is like, how can I show up and be the teacher to whoever's in front of me today, and not just coming with agenda that I'm gonna try to push on, but
Mhm.
being able to be adaptable depending on who's in front of me. And I think that's some of the skill sets and knowledge that my teachers have given me.
Mhm.
And I think that's why I feel very strongly and confident in the way I teach, is because it doesn't matter what's popular. I want to teach to who's in front of me that day, whatever that is, whether it's a one-on-one private, whether it's a big group classes, whether it's online classes. I think that's kind of the knowledge and the truth that I can stand up every day and feel great for showing up to do that rather than following what's popular or what's trendy.
Mm. So this triggered another question in my mind. I talk a lot about what you're describing, the benefit to your students to doing the walk and talk versus doing the practice with me approach. And of course, there's a hybrid, and of course, there's no right or wrong. But I think in you bringing it up, it brings up the topic of when I walk around the room, what's available to me that isn't available to me when I'm practicing with them. Therefore, what's available to them because I'm more able to see them. Now,
Mhm.
one of the things I did a video on this recently on Instagram and I got a bunch of views and comments. This idea that what you described when you go into the room and you practice with your class, you literally, in my view, build a learning pattern, like you build the neural pathways that say, I can only teach the sequence if I do the sequence, because that's how you're training yourself. It's like if you were training a 3-year-old to tie their shoes a particular way, that's how they would tie their shoes because that's how they were trained.
Mhm.
For the teacher who's listening, who would love to practice less and walk around more, but they've literally trained themselves, because you know what that looks like. They write out a new sequence and then they practice it at home 50 times. And then, of course, when they go in the room to teach it, they practice it with them. So,
Mhm.
what would you say would be a way that they could begin to lessen their dependency on practicing with the class and move into more of what you're describing, which is walking around? Did you go through that transition? What worked for you?
Yeah, definitely. And I love how you brought that up because in the beginning, when I was a newer teacher, I was doing the whole class with everybody. I just had a mat in the front of the room and I was doing everything with them. And that was like my comfort zone. Like it felt so comfortable for me to stay on my mat and just do the practice with them. So I feel you for the teachers who is doing that. And I also agree with you. I think there's no one right way to teach. So sometimes you do have to demo depending on who you're teaching to or what kind of context it is. So I think it all depends. But for teachers who want to start walking around or who want to start practicing less, demoing less while you're teaching, I usually give advice of like maybe start with when students are in down dog. Maybe that's when you get off the mat and walk around a little bit and give a few cues of down dog. And that's a little bit comfortable because in down dog, students' head are down, they're not looking at you. Sometimes that can be very nervous when they're just looking straight at you. So down dog can be a great one. And then maybe you add like, okay, well, sun salutation is a time that I'm gonna get off my mat and walk around and start practicing saying it without having to demo every single time. So just like maybe choosing one or two poses at a time in class and slowly practicing that and getting comfortable. And then I think as eventually you're able to do a little bit more each time. Um, and I do want to say that the reason why I learned how to teach without demoing initially was because I got injured. So I couldn't demo anymore. So again, I was kind of put in the situation where like, well, I still have to work and make money. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to make rent. So I was still teaching all my classes even after I got injured and I couldn't demo. And that's kind of how I learned. And but you don't have to wait till you're injured. So I would recommend trying it with down dog first, and then maybe with even cat cow, or who knows, just like a little things here, little poses, and just slowly increasing that.
Yeah, I love that. Matter of fact, I call it cueing without doing, along with calling it the walk and talk. And I got this funny email today from a teacher who saw me talking about this on Instagram, and she said, Karen, I have to tell you that when I saw that video about cueing without doing, I realized I have to practice with them in order to do it. So I've started setting up in my house a bunch of pillows on the floor as if they're students. And I've started practicing my sequence by walking around the pillows and talking myself through it. And she said that it's amazing because almost all the classes I attend, the teacher's practicing with them. So this is really the first time I'm literally building the mental infrastructure to allow me to teach my sequence without doing it. And I wrote her back and I was like, the vision of you in your living room with all these pillows out as if they're pretend students just makes my heart leap for joy because now you're giving yourself more options. And that's what you're saying is it doesn't mean it's black or white. Certainly if you freak out and you forget where you are and it's helpful in that moment to jump on the mat and do it, you have to do it because you have to keep the ball rolling. So yeah, I totally agree with you and we're not saying one way or the other. So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little more about, you mentioned you mentor teachers, and certainly now that you're a seasoned teacher and you've realized all these amazing things that have helped your growth, what are some of the things when you're working with teachers, especially for someone who's listening who is newer? I mean, I'm guessing you might get some newer-ish people that you work with.
Mhm.
What you mentioned pillar before, and you mentioned like the educational component is an important pillar to you. So
Mhm.
what are some of the other pillars of teaching that when you're working with somebody in a mentorship role, the things that you're offering them to sort of ground them in good, solid teaching?
Yeah, definitely. I have I did a podcast episode, solo episode about like three things that I think it's so important for teachers to improve, to become a better teacher, pretty much. But I can think of in my mentorship, I would say there's four. But for sure, one was continuing education. I think that's super important. But like I said, not it can't stand on its own. You can do all the continuing education you want, but if you're not out there practicing, actually teaching, you're not going to get
Mm,
become a better teacher. You can continue to learn, but you have to also be out there teaching it to get good at teaching. So definitely like get out there and teach, like quantity, like, if you do it 10,000, 100,000 times, you're going to become a next level. So it's just that you have to get out there and start teaching. And also, so that's one, continuing education is two. And then the third one is consistency. Just be consistent. And even if it's once a week you have a class to teach, just be consistent at teaching that once a week. If you say you're going to show up and be there, like be there as much as you can every week at the same time. Be consistent. I think it's huge, not only to become a good teacher, but also just like being a good human. Like I feel like if you're consistent and you're gonna be there when you said you're gonna be there, you're gonna show up when you said you're gonna show up, your students, your colleagues, people around you are gonna start to know like this is who you are. You are the kind of person who is gonna be there when you said you're gonna be there, who's gonna show up when you said you're gonna show up. Um, and I think that like building that quality characteristic of yourself is has it's so important because you just have no idea when somebody can like recommend you to a new studio, new corporate client, new private client, or new job opportunities, or somebody could refer you to your new online courses, online studios. And I think that kind of referral and recommendation comes because people trust you. Like people trust that you are the person who's going to be there or who's going to show up when you say you're going to show up. So being consistent is another one. So consistency, teach a lot, how as much as you can, or as much as you're able to, and continue education. But the fourth one that's really important for me in my mentorship program I run, it's a group mentorship program. So community is huge. And that's the reason why I started my mentorship program, because when I was a newer teacher and I would just finish 200 hour and I'm like, well, let's see if I can do this full time. it was really challenging to find people to talk to who were already doing this for longer than I have. I
Mm.
wanted to find people or people who were also in my, who's also new teachers who's trying to do this. So like trying to find people to speak to, people to get advice from, or people to kind of share your challenges together with, or celebrate your wins together with, like those kind of community was something I wish I had when I was a newer teacher. I had to kind of figure out a lot of things on my own. And that's one of the reasons that's so important for me to start this mentorship program was I wanted to create this like supportive community of yoga teachers and not in a competition kind of way because that happens too in the yoga world. The teachers can become competitive with one another. Whereas I wanted this super supportive, encouraging community where we can support each other's offering or celebrate each other's wins or are there to speak to somebody's like, hey, I want to practice my audition that's happening tomorrow at the studio. Can somebody, help me practice this audition with? Or that kind of community that can be there and show up for each other, I think is huge. I think community is so important. And to this day, I'm very, very thankful for some of my colleagues that I have that are also full-time yoga teachers that, that I found along the way of my journey that now I get to go to when I want to talk about something that's going through me or, want to get advice or second opinion on certain things. I think it's so important to have that. And sometimes teaching yoga can feel like a lonely path. And I have felt that before. And I really want to provide that space and community for yoga teachers, new or, experienced teachers that, we have each other. We can help each other. We can encourage each other and we can celebrate each other and support each other. So I think community is another huge component.
Yeah, I can't agree with that more. I feel like now more than ever, people are really disjointed, and yoga teachers really thrive when they're in a community versus when they're just running around doing their own thing. That was similar to yourself. I have a monthly membership called the Yoga Teacher Confidence Club. And I remember in one of the recent workshops, I was giving them an exercise to do that involved creating a power mantra, especially if you feel nervous before you go in and teach. And each one was sort of going around sharing what they just spontaneously came up with. And this one person was like a little unsure of what they would say, and the other teachers were chipping in with suggestions. And one of the teachers in the club actually does live near this person, so she knows her personally, and they meet on the side on their own. And so she had kind of insight to this particular person, so she was really like giving her a lot of suggestions. And I just kind of sat back and observed people interacting with each other on behalf of this one teacher who was sort of struggling to come up with an empowering mantra that she could say before she taught her class. And it was really a beautiful thing to witness. And so it touches on everything that you're saying, this magic that happens when yoga teachers get together in support of one another, not in competition.
Yes, yes, so true. That's like one of my favorite part of the mentorship program. It's just like us coming together and checking, we do check-ins in the beginning and also, like we sometimes do Q&A sessions, but I don't want it to be just me answering questions. I want everybody to chime in, oh, this similar thing happened to me before and I handle it this way, or I've seen teacher do it this way. And I want it to be this community, not just like me as a quote unquote leader who's like leading everybody and giving everybody the answers, but it's this communal it's a community that we all share and we try to lift each other up.
Yeah, and that's one of the fun things about being online. You can get people from all over the world, and you're not just limited. If you were doing it IRL, you would just have people who live near you. So I love that. So I
Mhm.
have a final question for you, and I'll just sort of pose it in this way. When you were mentioning before the importance of continuing education, but you were saying you have to also be teaching, it reminded me of several times I'll talk to a teacher who, for whatever reason, after their 200-hour training, they either started or stopped teaching, many of whom, because of COVID, they started and then stopped, and then they didn't get back into it. And so now time has passed and they feel like it's too late for me. I forgot how to have the nerve to go in and teach. And so they do take a lot of trainings, and that becomes what they tell themselves is being a yoga teacher. There's no actual teaching happening. And so
Mhm.
sometimes I'll say to that person, I'm I'm hearing you say that you want to get back to teaching. What's stopping you from doing that right now? And that question will oftentimes make the person realize there's something blocking them from
Mhm.
being the teacher they want to be, from actually, in this case, getting back into teaching.
Mhm.
So, my final question is around in your work with yoga teachers who either are outright struggling, they don't feel like they're quote unquote doing it right, or however that shows up for them, or even teachers who it's going okay, but they enroll in your program because they aspire to grow and do some more things, maybe build online like you have.
Mhm.
What do you find are the kinds of things, either mindset things, in the head things, or technical things that often hold them back from being the kind of teacher they want to be?
Mm. I what I see often, and I know this is not for everyone, but what I see often is perfectionism. Like people want to make sure you're perfect before you audition, or you want to make sure your online studio and website looks perfect before you launch it. And, or my YouTube video have to be perfectly edited before I upload it onto my YouTube channel. So that perfectionism, I think, gets in the way of a lot of yoga teachers. And yeah, I think you just have to embrace that in the beginning, there's going to be a lot of mistakes. You're going to make a lot of mistakes. It's not going to be perfect. It's probably will never be perfect. And that's why this journey is so wonderful, and it can be such a joy because we're always moving towards a direction, and it doesn't really matter like whatever that perfect endpoint is. It's the journey that matters more. So I think you just have to embrace that it's not going to be perfect, and you are going to make a lot of mistakes in the beginning. It's not going to be, you can't compare yourself to another teacher who's been doing it for 10 plus years. You're just starting out, but we all have been to that part of just starting out before. We have to go through that in the beginning to start to feel more confident and start to feel more strong in your teaching and who you are. So I think perfectionism is something I see a lot that's holding people back. And I think we just have to embrace that. We're just not going to be good at it in the beginning. And it's almost like really humbling for me too, to start something new as an adult. Like I'm trying to learn Spanish right now, and I'm making so many mistakes, but that's the only way I can
Mm.
learn. It's like I have to go through making so many mistakes and still make mistakes, but that I have to keep doing it, keep repeating, keep taking classes, taking classes from my tutors, and that's the only way to learn. So anything, just starting something new, you're always going to have that learning curve, and if you're not going to be great at it, but I think we just have to go through that, and also like enjoy the process of it rather than beating yourself up to it. Like it's a what a wonderful thing that we're working, like we're practicing something that we really care about.
Mm. Yeah, I find that too. Teachers that think it has to be perfect, it
Mhm.
puts so much pressure on them, and that pressure can cause imposter syndrome, can make teaching feel hard, can get in the way of just feeling joyful and like it's easy. So I think it's so important that you brought that up. So let's do this. You talked about your mentorship program. I want people to have an opportunity to find out how they can learn more about that program, and also your online school or teaching studio, how they can find out about that. So I'll just leave it to you to share anything that you want to share with the listener about staying in touch with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that. You can find me on Instagram. That's probably where I'm most active on social media. So it's Reika Yoga, very simple, no space, just simple Reika Yoga. And my website is the same thing. It's a reikayoga.com. So it's easy to find.
REI.
Ka, yeah, Reika, and yoga, no space in between. So that's probably the best way to find me and find out my offering, or just, message me if you want to chat with me.
Yeah, and your podcast, tell us how.
Thank you for reminding me that. I almost forgot. My podcast is called Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast, and I interview full-time yoga teachers from across the world, not just United States, to find out about their journey of how they got to be where they're at in their career and the challenges that they overcome, success they have, and just kind of what is the passion behind them to do what they do. And it's something, information and conversation I really craved when I was trying to figure out how to be a full-time yoga teacher. So I hope those conversations are really helpful to any teachers who's interested in being a full-time, or just a teacher who's interested in what it's like to be a full-time yoga teacher. And there's a great episode that we had where I got to interview Karen that you can go to.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that is so important because people sometimes are confused or questioning, could I actually make teaching my full-time career? And so having those interviews that you have on your show demystifies so much of what does that look like. And I'm sure when you look at all your episodes, there's a lot of variety. It doesn't look just one way.
Exactly. Yeah. There's no one right way to do it. There's everybody kind of find their own unique way. And what's interesting is I also have interviewed people who's a part-time teacher who was a full-time but now part-time, or teachers who was a yoga teacher before but now became chose another career path. So there's like a few of those in there as well that I think is also interesting and also realistic, because being a full-time yoga teacher is not for everyone. And it might be just a season that you go through as well. So it's a, I don't want to idealize and make it into like full-time yoga teacher is the best thing ever, because I think you can tell from those episodes that it is a challenging path, but people who do it, they do it because they love it and they have found their own unique way to make it work.
Yeah, that is fantastic. Well, of course, I'll put the links that you mentioned in the show notes. So for the listener, you can find them there. And we also shared them verbally. So that's great. So I'm going to have you hold on. But for the listener, we're going to end this episode here. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and sharing your story. This has been a lot of fun. And I'm super excited to get this out. This will go live on June 9th, 2025. Okay.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you.